Have you ever wondered where the true origin of human civilization lies? Most people point to Egypt's pyramids or the mystery of Stonehenge, but nestled quietly between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers lies a civilization that predates them all, one that shaped language, law, science, and the very way we see the cosmos. Welcome to Sumer, a land of gods, kings, and mysteries that still leave scientists scratching their heads and storytellers wide-eyed in awe. So buckle in, because this journey into the deepest roots of our past might just give you goosebumps, and might even leave you questioning what we think we know about humanity's beginnings. Before the Roman Empire rose, before pharaohs ruled the Nile, and even before the Bible's earliest chapters were imagined, there was Sumer. Located in southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, the land of Sumer was anything but desolate. This region, watered by the twin lifelines of the Tigris and Euphrates, became one of the first fertile cradles of civilization. The Sumerians did not merely survive here, they thrived. They farmed wheat and barley using irrigation systems more advanced than some countries use today. They lived in dense, structured city-states with administrative centers, marketplaces, ziggurats, and written laws. They were also the first to create written language. Let that sink in. Writing, the very tool I am using to bring this story to you, was invented by the Sumerians. That alone should cement them among history's giants. But what makes their story even more chilling is how advanced they were. Too advanced, some might argue, for their time. You have probably heard of Egyptian hieroglyphs, beautiful, symbolic images carved into temple walls. But long before those images graced stone, Sumerians were carving abstract symbols into wet clay tablets. Cuneiform, the world's first known writing system, began as a series of pictograms but evolved into a complex system of wedge-shaped marks. These marks recorded everything: trade transactions, temple offerings, star charts, even ancient medical prescriptions. Why did they invent writing? The answer is surprisingly mundane: to keep track of grain. But what began as simple accounting quickly evolved. Priests and scribes used it to record hymns, myths, prayers, and laws. Suddenly, knowledge could be stored, copied, and passed down across generations. This was not just a tool of administration, it was the foundation of cultural memory. And yet, even today, only a fraction of the estimated 500,000 Sumerian tablets have been translated. What secrets still lie hidden in ancient script? When we think of early cities, we might imagine small clusters of huts. But Sumerian cities were vast, organized, and governed by centralized authority. Uruk, for example, was one of the largest cities in the world, around 3000 BCE, home to nearly 50,000 people, a staggering number for its time. Its massive walls were built of sun-dried clay bricks. Its center was dominated by a colossal ziggurat, rising tier by tier toward the heavens like a stairway to the gods. These cities were not chaotic jungles. They were engineered with stunning precision. They had irrigation canals, public squares, temples, and palaces. Streets were aligned with the cardinal directions, and even sewage systems were discovered beneath certain buildings. But perhaps most fascinating of all was how deeply religion was woven into every layer of life. In Sumer, there was no separation between church and state. The priest-kings ruled by divine authority, and every city was built as a tribute to its patron god. The Sumerian worldview was not one of random chance. Everything that happened, from a bountiful harvest to a devastating flood, was seen as the will of divine beings. Their religion was polytheistic, and every force in nature had a god: Anu, the god of the sky and king of the gods; Enlil, the god of air and storms; Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and magic; Inanna, the goddess of love, war, and political power. What is chilling is how human their gods were. They laughed, fought, cried, fell in love, and made mistakes. Their mythology told stories not just of divine miracles, but of divine drama, of betrayal, of forbidden love, of gods growing jealous, and of mortals caught in the middle. And none of these gods were more mysterious or more controversial than the Anunnaki. Here's where things get strange. The Anunnaki, whose name means those who came from the heavens, were not just gods in Sumerian mythology. They were engineers of mankind. According to myth, the gods once toiled to keep the earth in balance, but eventually grew weary. So, They created humans from clay mixed with the blood of a sacrificed god. This was no symbolic tale. The tablets go into detail. The gods Enki and Ninhursag sculpted the first humans and gave them life. But what was their purpose? To serve the gods. To work in the fields. To build temples. It is a sobering thought. In Sumerian belief, humans were not made in the image of God for love and companionship. They were created for labor. The implications of this story are so eerie, so precise, that modern theorists have drawn comparisons to genetic engineering thousands of years before such ideas were even possible. And that is not the end of the mystery. One of the most chilling parts of Sumerian mythology is the story of the Great Flood, a cataclysm so severe it wiped out nearly all of mankind. If that sounds familiar, it should. The Sumerian version predates the story of Noah by centuries. According to the Epic of Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity became too noisy, too prideful. The gods were annoyed and decided to wipe them out. But Enki, once again the friend of mankind, warned a human named Ziusudra, or Utnapishtim, instructing him to build a giant boat to save his family and every species. Sound familiar? The Sumerian version includes rainfall, a boat, animals, and a raven sent to find dry land. Coincidence? Or shared memory of a real event passed down across generations and cultures? Many scholars believe the flood may have been a historical event, perhaps a massive river flood that devastated early Mesopotamian civilization. Others suggest a mythological memory of the sudden sea level rise at the end of the last ice age. Whatever its origin, the story still resonates. A divine reset. A second chance. A warning. As we explore deeper into Sumerian mythology, one figure consistently rises above the rest. Enki, the god of wisdom, water, and creation. Unlike the other gods, who are often depicted as distant or wrathful, Enki shows a deep connection with humanity, even helping them survive divine wrath during the Great Flood. But it is not just his role in the flood myth that makes Enki fascinating. Enki is often portrayed as a god who provides knowledge, the very building blocks of civilization. One myth in particular speaks of Enki's creation of humanity. As we have already learned, the gods were tired of toiling to keep the world in order, so they decided to create humans to work for them. Enki and Ninhursag took clay from the riverbed and mixed it with the blood of a sacrificed god. This was humanity's origin. Yet Enki's gift was not just in creating life, it was in shaping society. Enki taught the Sumerians the arts of craftsmanship, agriculture, and even the very laws of civilization. What is remarkable is how the Sumerians viewed Enki not just as a distant god, but as a teacher, someone who imparted the secrets of the universe. It is almost as though they believed the gods did not just create humanity, but helped guide it. When we think of ancient technology, we might imagine crude tools or basic machinery, but Sumerian technology was far more advanced than we often give it credit for. One example is their metallurgy, the art of extracting metals from the earth and transforming them into useful tools and weapons. It all started with gold, which was easily extracted from riverbeds in Mesopotamia. The Sumerians crafted delicate jewelry, earrings, and pendants. But while gold was beautiful, it was too soft to use as a tool or weapon. So they turned to copper, which was buried deep in the Zagros Mountains. But copper was not easy to find or extract. Sumerian traders had to journey through deserts and treacherous mountain ranges just to obtain it. Once they had copper, they heated it in clay furnaces, using charcoal to raise the temperature above 1,000 degrees Celsius. This process was dangerous. One mistake could ruin an entire batch of metal. But through patience and experimentation, the Sumerians developed a bronze alloy, a mixture of copper and tin. Bronze was much harder than copper, and soon the Sumerians were producing axes, knives, and military weapons on a massive scale. Why is this significant? Because bronze marked the beginning of the Bronze Age, a period that would transform societies worldwide. Without the Sumerians' groundbreaking work in metallurgy, later civilizations might have struggled to develop the tools necessary for progress. Now that the Sumerians had mastered bronze, their society was poised for great change. Bronze was more than just a material. It was a symbol of power. For the first time, warriors had weapons that were strong, durable, and could pierce armor. Swords, daggers, and spears became standard tools of warfare. Bronze was used not only for weapons but also for agricultural tools like sickles, plows, and hoes. But the Sumerians did not just use bronze for weapons and tools, they used it for art. Statues, jewelry, and intricate ceremonial items were all crafted from bronze. In fact, the Sumerians' attention to detail in their craftsmanship has left us with some of the most stunning works of art from the ancient world. Their trade networks, stretching across the known world, facilitated the exchange of precious materials like tin, gold, and lapis lazuli, resources necessary for creating these beautiful artifacts. As powerful city-states like Ur, Lagash, and Uruk competed for dominance, bronze became a symbol of wealth and military might. And yet, for all their technological achievements, the Sumerians remained mystified by certain forces in the world, forces they could not control. What is most striking about Sumerian religion is the complexity of their divine hierarchy. The Sumerians did not worship one supreme god, but rather a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each responsible for a different aspect of the natural world and human society. Take Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Inanna was not just a goddess of beauty or fertility. She was also a fierce warrior, leading armies into battle. Her journey to the underworld in the Epic of Inanna is one of the most famous myths in Sumerian literature, exploring themes of life, death, and resurrection. But Inanna was not the only powerful deity in the pantheon. Enlil, the god of wind and storm, controlled the fate of the city-states. Anu, the god of the heavens, was the supreme ruler of the gods. And Ninhursag, the earth goddess, was revered as the mother of all life. But the gods did not just exist in isolation. They were intertwined in a complex web of relationships, alliances, and rivalries. This polytheistic belief system permeated every aspect of Sumerian life, from the construction of cities to the daily rituals performed by priests. Religious practices were highly structured. Each city-state had its own patron deity, and the people relied heavily on rituals to appease the gods and ensure favorable weather, good harvests, and victory in war. The ziggurats, massive stepped pyramids that reached toward the heavens, were the focal point of these rituals. These structures were not just architectural marvels. They were the center of spiritual life, and at the top of each ziggurat sat a temple dedicated to the city's patron god. Now, let us return to the Anunnaki, the gods who, according to Sumerian myth, were directly involved in the creation of humanity. The Anunnaki were considered to be heavenly beings, or those who came from the heavens. But their role in Sumerian society was not just that of distant, powerful gods. They were believed to be intimately involved in human affairs, guiding kings, performing miracles, and sometimes even engaging in divine politics. In fact, many Sumerians believed that the Anunnaki were not just gods, but extraterrestrial beings, beings who came from other worlds and imparted their knowledge to humanity. This theory, which links the Anunnaki to ancient astronauts, suggests that the gods were not mythical beings at all, but advanced extraterrestrials who used their technology to shape human civilization. Some modern theorists have even suggested that the creation of humanity could have been the result of genetic manipulation, with the Anunnaki using their advanced technology to craft the human race for their own purposes. It is a fascinating theory, but it leaves us with more questions than answers. But even though the Anunnaki were central to Sumerian belief, it was human kings who wielded the true power in cities of Sumer. Sumerian kings, like Gilgamesh, Lugal-Zagesi, and Sargon, were believed to be chosen by the gods to rule. These kings were not just political leaders. They were seen as divine representatives on earth. Gilgamesh, in particular, is one of the most famous figures in Sumerian history. His epic, one of the oldest known stories in literature, tells the tale of his quest for immortality and his relationships with gods, friends, and enemies. The King List of Sumer records the reigns of these early monarchs, often with lifespans stretching into the thousands of years. But these records blur the lines between myth and reality, leaving us to wonder, how much of this was true history, and how much was legendary exaggeration? When you think of law, what comes to mind? The legal systems we follow today, built on centuries of precedent and structure, can trace their origins back to the Sumerians. It was the Sumerians who first realized the importance of written law. In the 21st century BCE, they introduced the first formal legal code, the Code of Ur-Nammu, This set of laws, written in cuneiform on clay tablets, marks a crucial moment in human history. Before Ur-Nammu, laws were typically oral traditions, passed down through generations, but the Sumerians understood that written laws could not only provide clarity and consistency, but could also protect the people from arbitrary rule. The Code of Ur-Nammu is fascinating because it focuses on justice, especially for the most vulnerable in society. It includes laws for protecting women, slaves, and orphans. Punishments for crimes were not always brutal, but rather aimed at fair compensation. For example, if a person caused damage to another's property, they would have to pay restitution, an approach that emphasized fairness rather than vengeance. But Ur-Nammu was not the only one to codify laws. A few centuries later, Hammurabi's code in Babylon would build upon these Sumerian principles, and later cultures, from Rome to the United States, would draw on Sumerian legal precedents. The most chilling takeaway: the Sumerians understood that laws were not just about governance, they were divine commands. The king, often a direct representative of the gods, was tasked with ensuring that laws were upheld. Therefore, their legal systems were not just social contracts. They were acts of divine order, linking the earthly and the celestial realms. While the Sumerians had gods for every aspect of life, they also had healers who blended divine knowledge with practical remedies. These healers, known as Akasu, played a critical role in Sumerian society, helping to diagnose and treat everything from fevers to broken bones. What is remarkable about Sumerian medicine is how it balanced the spiritual and the practical. Akasu were not only versed in herbs and healing methods, but also spiritual rituals meant to drive out evil spirits or invoke the blessings of the gods. The goddess Gula, the Sumerian deity of healing, was often called upon for her divine aid. Sumerians recorded their medical knowledge on clay tablets, many of which have survived to this day. These tablets list remedies using herbs, minerals, and plant-based concoctions. Willow bark for pain relief, a precursor to modern aspirin, garlic for infections, and honey as an antiseptic are just some examples of their advanced knowledge of natural medicine. However, they did not just rely on plants. Sumerians also practiced surgery, performing techniques like setting broken bones with splints made of wood and draining abscesses. But how did they know all of this? Without modern scientific knowledge or technology, the Sumerians learned through observation, trial, and error. They kept meticulous records of every ailment and its treatment, ensuring that future generations could build upon their findings. Perhaps most remarkably, the Sumerians understood the importance of hygiene. They knew to wash their hands before surgeries, an idea that, strangely enough, would not be rediscovered by the Western world until the 19th century. Looking up at the stars, the Sumerians saw something that most people today cannot imagine: order, divinity, and fate. For the Sumerians, the heavens were not simply a physical realm of stars and planets. They were an extension of the divine will. The Sumerians developed an incredibly sophisticated system of astronomy. They tracked the movements of the planets, stars, and constellations. Their understanding of time was deeply tied to the celestial rhythms of the universe. The calendar they created was based on the cycles of the moon, and they divided time into months of 30 days and years based on lunar movements. This calendar would serve as the foundation for other ancient cultures, like the Babylonians and Egyptians, who would later refine and adopt it. But it was not just about tracking time. The Sumerians used astrology to predict everything from the best times to plant crops to the outcome of wars. Gods spoke through the stars, and Sumerian kings often looked to the heavens for guidance. One of the most famous stories in Sumerian astronomy comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero seeks answers to the meaning of life and the nature of the afterlife through his journey. Along the way, he encounters celestial signs and omens that guide his fate, showing just how central the cosmos were to the Sumerian worldview. In the midst of their technological and artistic advances, the Sumerians created one of the most intriguing artifacts of all: seals. These small, carved stones or cylinders were used to stamp official documents and mark ownership. But their significance goes far beyond simple administrative purposes. The images carved onto these seals often depicted gods, animals, and abstract symbols. Some of these seals feature spirals, dots, and even what some have interpreted as astronomical motifs. The meaning behind these symbols remains a mystery to this day. Some have speculated that the seals represent cosmic knowledge passed down by the gods. Others believe that they were used as protective amulets, warding off evil spirits, or ensuring the safety of those who own them. Could these seals be a form of ancient communication, a way to share mystical knowledge across generations? Or were they simply tools of governance and protection? One of the most enduring questions about the seals is their repetition of certain motifs, such as the image of divine figures holding bags or objects. This motif, which can also be seen in cultures as far apart as Egypt and Central America, hints at an ancient, shared symbol of power, wisdom, or divine knowledge. The ziggurat, the towering stepped pyramid at the center of every major Sumerian city, remains one of the most iconic symbols of their civilization. But the purpose of these massive structures was far more than just architectural grandeur. They were religious symbols. Built as temples to the gods, the ziggurats were designed to bring the earthly realm closer to the divine. The structure was not just a place of worship, but a link between heaven and earth, allowing priests and kings to commune with the gods. The most famous ziggurat, the Ziggurat of Ur, was built in the 21st century BCE during the reign of King Ur-Nammu. Its construction involved the work of thousands of laborers, and its sheer size and scale reflected the power of the city-state. At the top of the ziggurat was a temple dedicated to the city's patron god, often accessible only to the high priests and the king. In many ways, the ziggurat was the center of life in Sumerian cities, where religion, politics, and power merged. By now, we have explored the gods, the kings, the advances in science, and the laws that shaped the Sumerian civilization. But there is still one more mystery to uncover: the Great Flood. In Sumerian myth, the flood was not just a catastrophe, it was a divine reset. The gods wiped out the old world to make way for a new one. But the flood is not just a myth. Evidence of large-scale flooding in Mesopotamia, combined with the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Epic of Atrahasis, suggests that the Sumerians may have been reflecting on a real event, perhaps a devastating flood that struck the region thousands of years ago. Could this be a memory of a cataclysmic event? Or was it simply a religious story, meant to explain the unpredictability of nature? The story of the flood remains one of the most enduring myths in human history, influencing cultures across the ancient world. It speaks to our deepest fears and hopes as humans face the wrath of the gods, but also find salvation through resilience. Sumer's rise to power and its incredible advancements in technology, law, and culture were nothing short of miraculous. Yet, like every civilization before and after, it faced the inescapable forces of decline. The very same forces that had propelled it to greatness would eventually contribute to its fall. While the Sumerians were capable of great feats, building ziggurats, creating written law, and advancing medicine, they could not escape the pressures of internal conflict, environmental disaster, and external invasion. What began as a shining beacon of civilization soon faltered under the weight of its own complexity and the challenges of an ever-changing world. How did this happen? What led to the fall of a civilization that had achieved so much? One of the most striking causes of Sumer's decline was its reliance on the environment. Sumer's fertile land, watered by the Tigris and Euphrates, allowed it to prosper, but this same environment became a double-edged sword. Over time, the Sumerians' sophisticated irrigation systems, while feeding a growing population, also caused soil salinization. As water was diverted to the fields, salts built up in the soil, making it harder to grow crops. It is difficult to overstate the impact of this problem. The Sumerians' survival had depended on their ability to cultivate the land, and as the soil became less productive, food shortages followed. This led to famines and population decline, leaving city-states weakened and divided. At the same time, the Sumerians were unable to control their water sources. The Euphrates River, prone to both flooding and drought, posed a constant threat to agriculture. In years when the river did not flood, crops failed. In years when it flooded too much, entire cities were submerged. Alongside these environmental stresses, political instability began to tear the Sumerians apart. The once powerful city-states, like Uruk, Ur, and Lagash, began to fall into constant warfare. Each city-state, ruled by its own king, became focused on its own survival, leading to rivalries and conflict. The kings of Sumer were not just political leaders, They were divinely ordained figures, chosen by the gods to rule. But as the kings fought to hold on to power, their authority began to unravel. The priest kings, who had once been seen as divine mediators, found their influence waning. These wars did not just drain resources, they also spread distrust and division. As the city-states waged war on each other, they left themselves vulnerable to external enemies. As the Sumerians' internal divisions grew, new powers began to rise in the region. In the 24th century BCE, the Akkadian Empire, led by Sargon of Akkad, conquered the Sumerian cities and united much of Mesopotamia under a single banner. Sargon, often hailed as the first true emperor, defeated the Sumerian kings and established his own dynasty. For a time, it seemed that the Akkadians might carry on the Sumerian legacy, but Sargon's empire was built on the very instability that Sumer had struggled with: constant military campaigns and a fragile alliance of diverse peoples and cultures. The Akkadians' rule over Sumer did not last. The empire eventually fractured, and another power rose to take its place: Babylon. Under Hammurabi, Babylon would become one of the most influential powers in ancient Mesopotamia, incorporating Sumerian culture while slowly pushing the Sumerians out of the historical spotlight. One of the final blows to the Sumerian civilization came with the destruction of the great city of Ur. By the time the city was sacked in the 18th century BCE, Sumer had already begun its decline. But Ur's fall marked the final collapse of the Sumerian way of life. Ur had been a symbol of Sumerian greatness, a city of immense wealth, advanced infrastructure, and religious importance. Its destruction was a metaphor for the fate of Sumer itself, a once great civilization brought low by a combination of environmental disaster, political infighting, and external invasion. In the wake of Ur's fall, the Sumerians' gods, once seen as all-powerful, seemed to have abandoned them. The ziggurats lay in ruins. The once thriving cities became little more than rubble. The Sumerian language, which had once been the language of kings and scribes, slowly faded from use. Yet, even in decline, Sumer's influence did not disappear. While the Sumerian city-states were overrun by invaders and their gods abandoned, their cultural legacy lived on. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and even later Persians all adopted aspects of Sumerian law, literature, and religion. The Code of Ur-Nammu would be used as a model by later civilizations, and the Sumerian language continued to be studied and used by scribes for centuries. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest works of literature in history, would influence countless future cultures, including the ancient Hebrews. Even in their downfall, the Sumerians managed to leave a lasting imprint on the world, an imprint that would influence the course of human history for millennia. As the final chapters of Sumer's civilization unfolded, the question remains: did the Sumerians know their own end was coming? Did they see the signs of their decline? Or did they believe their gods would intervene at the last moment? We have no definitive answers to these questions. However, what we do know is that the Sumerians, more than any other ancient civilization, were keenly aware of the cycles of nature. They understood that life and death were interconnected, and that every empire eventually faces its downfall. Perhaps it was this awareness of impermanence that shaped their mythologies, their rituals, and their approach to life. In the end, the Sumerians lived in a world of constant change, where mystery and disaster loomed just as large as their greatest triumphs. One final mystery remains: the Sumerians' Great Flood myth, which not only symbolizes the divine retribution they believed in, but also reflects a deeper truth about the impermanence of human civilization. The Flood myth is a story of destruction, but it is also a story of rebirth. After the waters subside, humanity begins again. From the wreckage of the old world, the Sumerians believed new life would emerge. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Sumer. Though the civilization itself perished, its ideas, its innovations, and its stories have lived on, passed down through generations, and reborn in the hearts of every culture that followed. Sumer's flood was not just a myth, it was a warning. The waters rise, civilizations fall, and in time, new empires rise from the ashes of the old. The Sumerians may have vanished from history over 4,000 years ago, but their legacy is still present in the world today. From the basic concepts of writing to the very measuring systems we use every day, Sumer laid the foundations for much of what we now take for granted. Think about the time we keep 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and a 360-degree circle. This system of measurement, known as the sexagesimal system, was first developed by the Sumerians and passed down to the Babylonians. Every time you check the time on your watch or use a compass, you are using a system that was born in Sumer. Beyond time, Sumer's influence extends into the realms of law, medicine, and even religion. Their legal codes, their astronomical knowledge, and their spiritual beliefs shaped the development of cultures and societies throughout history. But their most lasting legacy may be something even more fundamental: the idea that writing and knowledge could be passed down to future generations. At the heart of Sumer's influence is the written word, the very idea of recording knowledge and history for future generations. Before the Sumerians, humans had no means of writing things down beyond simple marks or symbols. But with the creation of cuneiform, the Sumerians invented a system of writing that could represent spoken language, allowing for detailed records of transactions, historical events, and even myths. This breakthrough revolutionized human communication. The ability to write allowed people to preserve their ideas, share knowledge, and create a collective memory. Sumer's written language paved the way for literature, administration, and science to be documented and passed down. Even today, when we write down laws, contracts, stories, or discoveries, we are continuing the legacy of the Sumerians, who first showed humanity how to capture the world in writing. When we think of justice today, we often think of modern courts, legal systems, and human rights. But the Code of Ur-Nammu, written around 2100 BCE, was one of the earliest attempts to formalize justice in a society. Ur-Nammu's code was groundbreaking not only because it was written down, but because it was based on the idea that laws should be consistent and fair for all members of society. While punishments were still harsh by modern standards, the code set rules for everything from commercial transactions to personal injury and even property rights. More than just a set of rules, Ur-Nammu's legal code was based on the belief that justice was a divine principle. The king, as a representative of the gods, was tasked with upholding these laws, and any attempt to subvert them was seen as a violation of divine order. Fast forward thousands of years, and the influence of Sumer's legal system is still felt in our modern systems of law and governance. One of the most remarkable achievements of the Sumerians was their advanced astronomy. They did not just observe the stars for religious purposes. They mapped them, tracked their movements, and predicted celestial events. The Sumerians were the first to create a lunar calendar, organizing the year into 12 months based on the phases of the moon. This system was later adopted by other civilizations, including the Babylonians, and is still the basis of the modern lunar calendar used in various cultures around the world. The Sumerians' deep understanding of the stars did not stop with timekeeping. They believed that celestial movements were tied to the will of the gods, and astrology was used to predict everything from famine to victories in battle. This practice of using the stars to guide human decisions would later influence the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. Even modern astronomy owes a debt to Sumerian methods. The Sumerians may not have had telescopes or advanced technology, but their astrological charts and star maps helped set the stage for more sophisticated forms of sky gazing. When you think of the ancient world's most iconic structures, the pyramids of Egypt probably come to mind. But the Sumerians, long before the Egyptians, were constructing some of the most remarkable and massive structures of the ancient world, the ziggurats. These towering stepped pyramids were more than just religious structures. They were symbols of humanity's connection to the divine. The Sumerians believed that the ziggurats' height was a direct link between earth and heaven, allowing them to worship the gods and communicate with the divine. The ziggurat of Ur, for example, stood 100 feet tall, and its construction required massive amounts of labor and resources. Today, the ruins of ziggurats still stand as testaments to the ingenuity of the Sumerians, and their architectural design influenced later civilizations, including the Babylonians and Assyrians, who would construct their own grand temples and pyramids. In modern architecture, the influence of ziggurats can be seen in structures that symbolize religious power and divine authority, like the temples of the ancient world and modern skyscrapers that touch the sky. The Sumerians were one of the first civilizations to establish a complex polytheistic religion that shaped the way humans would interact with the divine for millennia to come. Their gods were not just distant, all-powerful beings. They were intimately involved in the lives of Sumerians, controlling everything from the weather to the fate of individuals. The Sumerians' religious beliefs had a profound impact on later civilizations, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. One of the most important legacies of Sumerian religion is the concept of divine kingship. Sumerian kings were not just rulers, they were seen as representatives of the gods on earth, chosen to rule with divine authority. Later empires, from ancient Egypt to medieval Europe, would adopt this idea of kingship, with rulers seen as divinely appointed to maintain cosmic order. The Sumerians' belief in rituals, sacrifices, and sacred spaces also laid the foundation for many of the religious practices that continue to shape modern societies, whether in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. The art of Sumer is perhaps one of the most mysterious and intriguing aspects of their civilization. From the earliest examples of carved seals to the intricate designs on vases and mosaics, Sumerian art was both highly symbolic and functional. One of the most notable features of Sumerian art is its use of symbols, especially the handbag motif. This image of divine figures holding a bag has intrigued scholars for centuries. What did this symbol represent? Was it a container for sacred knowledge? Or was it a mark of power? The answer remains elusive, but the symbol's repeated appearance across different cultures hints at a shared ancient understanding. Sumerian art also reflects their deep spirituality. The votive statues and temple carvings show gods, kings, and divine figures that convey a sense of awe and reverence. These artifacts, still preserved in museums today, continue to captivate us with their beauty, craftsmanship, and mystery. Despite the wealth of knowledge we have gained from Sumerian civilization, many questions remain unanswered. How did they achieve such advanced knowledge without modern tools? Did they have access to technologies that were lost over time? And what happened to the vast troves of Sumerian knowledge that were likely lost in the centuries following their collapse? These questions only add to the mystique of Sumer, and the more we learn, the more we realize how much there is still to uncover. What we do know is that the Sumerians, though they no longer exist as a political force, have left an indelible mark on history. Their ideas about law, knowledge, and the divine have resonated through every culture that followed, influencing how we understand the world and our place in it. Sumer, the cradle of civilization, did not just lay the groundwork for the ancient world. It created a philosophical foundation that still influences us today. The Sumerians were not just building cities and creating laws. They were shaping the way humanity would think about society, knowledge, and even the universe. Modern thought, both in philosophy and science, owes much to the ideas that Sumerians first explored. Their attempts to understand the cosmos, life, and divine order were the beginning of humanity's search for meaning in an infinite universe. In many ways, Sumerian cosmology, their understanding of the universe and its relationship to the divine, was the precursor to the philosophical and scientific frameworks that would emerge in ancient Greece, India, and beyond. But perhaps most striking is the Sumerians' realization that knowledge and wisdom were not just tools to control the world. They were the key to unlocking the mysteries of existence itself. One of the most profound aspects of Sumerian thought was their cosmology, the way they saw the world and its connection to the divine. In Sumer, the gods were not just distant, powerful beings. They were intricately woven into the fabric of nature and human life. The Sumerians believed the universe was a cosmic drama, with gods acting as players who controlled everything from the seasons to the fate of nations. Every celestial movement, every storm, every harvest was a manifestation of divine will. This view of the cosmos shaped not just their religious beliefs, but their understanding of life itself. The cycle of the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, and the stars above were all seen as signs of divine order. God's decisions made manifest in the world. The Sumerians' conception of the heavens as a realm where the divine and mortal worlds meet would lay the groundwork for later metaphysical systems in ancient Egypt, Greece, and even modern Western thought. The Sumerians were the first to pose questions about life and existence, questions that would later become the core of philosophical inquiry. In their myths, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, we see deep reflections on mortality, humanity's purpose, and the meaning of life. Gilgamesh's search for immortality, driven by his fear of death, mirrors the existential questions that philosophers would continue to grapple with for millennia. What is the meaning of life? Is there a greater purpose to human existence? What does it mean to be human? These are the same questions that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle would later explore in ancient Greece. The Greek philosophers did not emerge in a vacuum. They were building on the intellectual achievements of earlier cultures, especially the Sumerians, who first asked these questions. The Sumerian legacy of asking questions about life, death, and the divine is what connects them to later philosophical thought. Their stories about gods and mortals, their reflections on the afterlife, and their search for meaning are the foundation stones upon which much of philosophy was built. While the Sumerians are primarily known for their contributions to writing, religion, and law, their scientific achievements are just as impressive and far-reaching. They were among the first to begin systematically studying the natural world, and their insights continue to echo in modern science today. The Sumerians were keen astronomers, tracking the movement of the stars and planets. They created one of the earliest known calendars, based on the cycles of the moon, which provided a foundation for later scientific advancements. But the Sumerians did not just observe the sky. They also used their knowledge to build advanced structures. Their use of geometry in the construction of ziggurats, city walls, and temples was groundbreaking for its time. They also explored the world of medicine, documenting detailed remedies for ailments and creating a complex understanding of human health that was passed down through generations. Their use of herbal medicine, as well as their development of basic surgical procedures, would influence future medical practices, especially in the ancient world. The Sumerians did not think of science as we do today. There was no distinction between the scientific, the religious, and the spiritual. They saw all knowledge as connected. But this holistic approach to learning laid the groundwork for the later scientific revolution in Europe and the expansion of human knowledge. As we have seen, the Sumerians' invention of writing is one of the most profound contributions to human civilization. Writing was not just a tool for record-keeping, it became a means of preserving knowledge and sharing wisdom across generations. In Sumerian society, scribes held a position of great respect. These individuals were responsible for recording historical events, legal codes, and religious texts. They were the gatekeepers of knowledge, ensuring that ideas, stories, and laws were passed down through time. This tradition of recording knowledge would continue throughout history. From the ancient Egyptians to the Greeks and Romans, every culture that followed the Sumerians would adopt the practice of writing as a tool for sharing and preserving knowledge. Even today, our reliance on written texts, books, and digital records can be traced back to the Sumerians, who first used clay tablets and styluses to record the most important aspects of their culture and civilization. The development of law in Sumer was another major milestone that shaped the modern world. The Code of Ur-Nammu, as mentioned earlier, was one of the first known legal codes to be written down, publicly displayed. It established a legal framework that set out specific penalties for crimes, and most importantly, protected the vulnerable in society. The Sumerian emphasis on justice, including fair treatment of women, slaves, and orphans, was revolutionary for its time. It marked a shift from arbitrary rule to a structured legal system where individuals had rights, and the king was bound by law just as much as any other citizen. Later empires, including Babylon, Persia, and Rome, would take inspiration from Sumer's legal systems. Hammurabi's Code, one of the most famous legal texts from ancient Babylon, is heavily influenced by the Sumerian Ur-Nammu Code. And even today, the fundamental principles of justice, equal rights, and accountability that emerged in Sumer form the basis for our modern systems of governance. Sumer's ideas did not just stay confined to the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates. Through trade, war, and cultural exchange, Sumer's knowledge spread to neighboring civilizations, influencing their development in profound ways. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians all adopted Sumerian writing, law, and religious practices. Even distant cultures like the Egyptians and Indus Valley civilizations were influenced by Sumerian innovations, particularly in trade, mathematics, and construction techniques. Today, we can trace the influence of Sumer in every major civilization that came after it, each one building upon the intellectual foundation the Sumerians laid down. As we conclude our journey through the Sumerian civilization, one question remains: what can we learn from the Sumerians today? Perhaps it is the realization that humanity's greatest achievements, from writing and law to art and architecture, are often born from collaboration, creativity, and a deep connection to the divine. The Sumerians did not just create a society, they created a way of thinking about the world that continues to shape human progress. The Sumerians understood that knowledge could not be hoarded. It had to be shared, preserved, and passed down to future generations. They saw wisdom not just as a practical tool, but as something sacred, a means to understand the universe and our place within it. Their stories, written on clay tablets thousands of years ago, still speak to us today, reminding us that knowledge, justice, and humanity are the building blocks of civilization. As we reflect on the incredible journey we have taken through Sumerian history, one thing becomes clear: the legacy of the Sumerians has endured not just as a distant memory, but as a living influence that continues to shape our world. Though the Sumerian cities have long since turned to dust, their ideas, innovations, and creations have echoed across time, resonating through the ages. From the laws we follow today to the stars we study, the Sumerians were the first architects of the human mind, setting the foundations for everything that came after. The cities of Sumer may be gone, but the influence of their ideas remains in our modern world, woven into the very fabric of our civilization. In studying the Sumerians, we can see a civilization that not only mastered the practical aspects of life, but also reached deep into the realms of philosophy and spirituality. The Sumerians were among the first to ask the biggest questions about life, death, and our place in the cosmos, and they did so with a keen understanding of the natural world and the divine. Their contribution to writing, which allowed for the recording of knowledge and culture, is perhaps their most lasting achievement. The Sumerians did not just write to keep track of trade, they wrote to preserve their myths, record their laws, and pass down their wisdom to future generations. And this is where we find the most important lesson of all: the preservation of knowledge. The Sumerians understood that the future depended on the ability to pass knowledge forward. This idea was revolutionary for its time, and it laid the groundwork for every civilization that followed. Today, we carry the torch they lit, whether through literature, law, mathematics, or even medicine. And as we continue to evolve, we must remember that the preservation of knowledge, in all its forms, is the key to the survival and flourishing of humanity. From the laws we follow to the time we keep, Sumer's influence is embedded in the framework of our modern societies. Their sexagesimal system for measuring time, angles, and even the construction of cities. These were innovations that allowed the Sumerians to reach unprecedented levels of organization and achievement. The Code of Ur-Nammu was not just the first recorded legal system, it was a philosophical statement about the balance between justice and mercy. This idea of creating fair, accessible laws that protect the most vulnerable members of society became a cornerstone for future legal systems, including those in Babylon, Rome, and the Western world. And it is not just in the legal sphere. The Sumerians' advances in astronomy, medicine, and mathematics laid the intellectual groundwork for future discoveries. Without the Sumerians' early studies of the stars and mathematical systems, later civilizations may not have been able to achieve the same breakthroughs in navigation, engineering, and science. Their legacy can be seen in the tools of our everyday life: the calendars, the timekeeping systems, the legal codes, and even the astrological charts we still use today. Sumerian culture was built on a foundation of searching for meaning, especially in the face of mortality. Perhaps this is the most universal aspect of the Sumerian legacy: their understanding of life and death. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero embarks on a quest for immortality, only to learn that eternal life is beyond reach. But through this journey, Gilgamesh discovers that the true value of life lies not in the search for immortality, but in the meaning we create in our relationships, our contributions to society, and our efforts to make the world a better place. This message resonates even today. While we may not be able to avoid the inevitable end of our lives, we can still leave a lasting legacy, one that will influence future generations, just as the Sumerians' ideas continue to impact us. Despite all the knowledge we have gained about the Sumerians, many mysteries still remain. While archaeologists have uncovered countless clay, tablets, artifacts, and ruins, much of Sumerian culture remains hidden, locked away in the sands of time. For example, the Anunnaki, the gods who played such a crucial role in Sumerian mythology, are still shrouded in mystery. Were they truly gods, or could they have been something else entirely, extraterrestrial beings who visited Earth in ancient times? Could their influence on humanity's development be part of a much larger cosmic puzzle that we are still trying to understand? And what about the seals? Those small, intricate carvings that may hold the key to understanding Sumer's religious beliefs? Scholars are still debating their meaning, and some believe these seals may contain secrets about divine knowledge or cosmic wisdom that have yet to be deciphered. The questions surrounding Sumerian society are as vast and mysterious as the civilization itself, and the more we learn, the more we realize that we are only scratching the surface of their hidden knowledge. The legacy of the Sumerians also continues to captivate the modern imagination. From science fiction to historical documentaries, Sumer has remained a source of fascination. Their gods, their myths, their achievements. These have inspired countless stories, theories, and artistic works throughout the centuries. Today, the mystique of Sumer lives on in films, books, and academic studies, drawing people in from all over the world who seek to understand the civilization's great accomplishments and secrets that still lie buried beneath the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia. The Sumerians were, in many ways, ahead of their time. Their ability to ask big questions, their technological innovations, and their spiritual beliefs continue to inspire not just historians and archaeologists, but also writers, artists, and thinkers who draw on Sumer's mysteries and wisdom to spark new ideas. As we move forward into an increasingly complex world, the Sumerians' greatest lesson remains relevant: the need to preserve knowledge. Today, more than ever, we live in a time when information is constantly being produced, shared, and destroyed. In a world that is growing ever more digital and global, it is essential that we record, document, and pass on our wisdom to future generations, just as the Sumerians did with their clay tablets. We are the modern scribes of a new age, tasked with ensuring that the knowledge and wisdom we have accumulated today will be preserved for the future. The Sumerians gave us the tools to record history, share ideas, and improve life. It is our responsibility to continue that legacy. The Sumerians knew something fundamental about human civilization: it is cyclical. The rise of empires, the flourishing of knowledge, and the eventual decline, these are the inevitable patterns of history. But what makes a civilization truly great is not its ability to avoid decline, it is its legacy. The Sumerians understood that even in decline, their knowledge, stories, and creations could continue to inspire future generations. As we look around us today, it is clear that the cycle continues. We are living in an age of great knowledge, technological innovation, and cultural exchange. But we must also be mindful of the fragility of these achievements. Like the Sumerians, we too must ensure that the wisdom of today is preserved and passed on to those who come after us. In the end, the Sumerians' legacy is not just in what they built, but in how we carry forward the torch of human knowledge. The Sumerian story is not just one of history, it is a reminder of what humanity is capable of achieving when we ask the big questions, push the boundaries of knowledge, and preserve what we learn for future generations. Their civilization may have faded, but their influence lives on, guiding us as we continue our own journey through time. Thank you for exploring the world of the Sumerians with us. If their legacy has sparked your curiosity, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. Because, just like the Sumerians, the story of humanity is still being written.